On today's show, I think Dean Wade is the best option for the Cavs to start at small forward when they're fully healthy. I'll tell you why. Plus, we will talk about who are the best and worst matchups for the Cavs in the playoffs. That's all straight ahead on this mailbag edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot, and you're listening to another edition of Locked On Cavs, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in all of America. You can find this show and any other Locked On podcast anywhere you get them. That's Apple, that's Spotify, that is YouTube as well. If you're watching right now on YouTube, please do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us and hit the notification bell. And if you are listening anywhere, make sure you are subscribed to the show. It is the very best way to help grow this channel. And this edition of Locked On Cavs brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON, that is LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, going to be answering a bunch of mailbag questions. Have over 45 submissions, a lot of great questions. Actually going to do a part 2 of this show on Monday, diving into even more things. But on today's show, I want to tackle what I think is the ideal starting 5 for the Cavs, why I think that is the case, who the Cavs match up best and worst in the postseason among the other 3 top teams in the Eastern Conference. And we also are going to dive a little bit into who I would protect if there were a hypothetical expansion draft in the NBA to take place this summer. But I wanted to start with the starting lineup. So this question was asked by a handful of people. It's a very popular question right now. I think it's a very interesting talking point. So I do want to give credit to a couple of people for asking it. Like Terrell Smith on Twitter, he asked it. CE Talks asked the preferred closing lineup, which kind of goes along. We'll get into that a little bit later. But he asked, because Terrell does know, he listens to the show. He knows where I come out on this. Like me saying in the cold open that I think Dean Wade should be the starting small forward is not some shock if you listen to the show. So Terrell asks, can you go deeper into your reasoning behind thinking Dean should be the 5th starter? I personally agree with you, but with the season Tyson is having, I think the general fan base would disagree. Dean doesn't get credit for how valuable and important he is to this team. So the reason why I think Dean Wade should be the starting small forward is multifaceted. I do think he is the best fit alongside the other 4 guys in that starting lineup. And of course, just to set the stage here, when the Cavs are fully healthy, that is James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. Those 4 are locks as a starter. And then I think Dean Wade should be that 5th. And reason number 1 is I believe that he is the best defensive option for the Cavs in that spot. I think that he provides them the most defensive versatility. And I also think that he is the best perimeter defender right now that the Cavs have in terms of being able to guard guys smaller than him, being able to guard guys bigger than him. Now, maybe the Keon Ellis will change our minds moving forward at a certain point, but I am going to trust what I've seen with Dean Wade and the fact that he does provide additional size for a team that does struggle more often than not with rebounding the basketball. I think that is something that makes a lot of sense. And I do think, too, you want to start these games off on the right foot. And oftentimes when you do that, it's because you want to be a good defensive team early. You don't want to allow your opponents to get into a rhythm on the offensive end of the floor. And I think having Dean Wade on the floor is something for the Cavs that could prevent that. And I think that's why he, to me, is the ideal starter. Now, off of that too, because it's not just, oh, how do they look in the first 6 minutes of the game? It's what do you look like after that? Because there were other questions, and some of them were, what should the ideal pairings be? And we'll talk about that here too, between, Mobley and Allen and Harden and Mitchell. Like I do believe that it should be Jarrett Allen and James Harden. I think that is going to be a lethal pick and roll duo, among the best in basketball. I don't think Jarrett Allen is going to look better ever than what he's going to look like over the next couple of months alongside James Harden. Like he is going to, I think it is so predictable, he is going to reach his career apex the rest of this season. So I think that duo should spend a lot of time on the floor together. So let's go through the rest of that group. So you've got Dean Wade on the floor. You've got Donovan Mitchell on the floor. You've got Evan Mobley on the floor. I think Mobley and Mitchell should come off of the floor at the same time. That should be that pairing. And I think the first two guys that should come off the bench are Jalen Tyson and Sam Merrill. I think right now, this basketball team, when they are fully healthy, and I say this knowing we've not seen Max Strus so far this year. So it is difficult for me right now, not knowing what Max is going to look like this year. It's hard for me to say, yes, he's in the top 7 or even top 8 at this point. Like, I do think because he's missed so much time, anything you get from Max, if you're the Cavs, is a bonus. Maybe he comes back and looks great when he's on the floor later on this year. Or maybe he doesn't. Nobody knows. And it's not even fair, I think, at this point to guess what it's going to look like. So because of that, I think the Cavs have a very clear top 7. I think it's those 5 starters that I just named, plus Jalen Tyson, who I do think, to be clear, 1 is a better player than Dean Wade, and 2 is having a better season than Dean Wade. But this is about fit, and it's about the ripple effects that the starting lineup could have. So in a perfect world, has Jalen Tyson earned the starting spot? 100%. Is Jalen Tyson right now a better basketball player than Dean Wade? I think so. But I think that Dean Wade's a better fit there. And I do think the Cavs could benefit from that first bench lineup that's in the game where you can slide Dean Wade from the 3 to the 4. You've got Jarrett Allen playing center, Dean Wade at the 4, Jalen Tyson at the 3, Sam Merrill in at the 2, and James Harden at the 1. What that gives you, 1, is 4 guys that are good defensively, plus even James Harden is not a great defender, but he has good size, which is something that is important on that end of the floor, if nothing else. So I think you're solid defensively. And then you've got, as I mentioned, this elite level pick and roll duo, plus you've got Sam Merrill, who is one of the best 3-point shooters in basketball. Jalen Tyson, who has been this year one of the best 3-point shooters in basketball. And while Dean Wade has not had a great year from beyond the arc, I do think he's a very, very high-level shooter. So you've got, in my opinion, an elite pick and roll duo and 3 elite 3-point shooters that are all plus defenders on the floor as part of your quote-unquote second unit. That's going to go against bench units for opposing teams. I think that could be an absolute killer lineup for the Cavs. So part of the reason why I think it makes sense to start Dean Wade, it's easier to shift him up to the 4 and then play that lineup as opposed to, I think, bringing Dean off the bench. I just think this is something that does make more sense. And of course, like, you could probably try and sell me on, well, you can just start Jalen and bring Dean in for Evan and bring Sam in for Donovan, and you get the same thing. And you would not be wrong about that. You do ultimately get the same thing. But I don't think that you start off as strong on the defensive side of things. And I do think, too, part of the reason why that I would lean more defense in this starting lineup is when you have Donovan Mitchell and James Harden on the floor, I don't want to say it doesn't matter who that 5th starter is, because that's not fair, but you're going to be able to put together an elite offense. Dean Wade, Jalen Tyson, Sam Merrill, like, all of those guys, I think, have different pros and different cons to their games. But I think that if any of them, and those are the 3 candidates, I think, but if any of them are in the starting 5, like, that offense is going to be elite. So of that group, what gives you the best defense with it? And I think Dean Wade is very much the answer there. And then CE Talks asks, is there a preferred closing lineup that you would want to see, or do you think it should just be based on opponent and who's playing better for us? I think that it has to be much more of a feel thing. I think it's really easy, and I would actually think it's advisable to, in the first half of games, have a plan. And you have to be able to deviate from the script at times. And I do think at times Kenny Atkinson has relied a little bit too on, and that's not just a this year thing. I think throughout his coaching career, I think he's relied a little bit too much on his script about when guys go into games, when guys come out of games. Like, I do think that is maybe a little bit of a fault of it. I don't think it's like some major thing, but it is something that I've noticed from him. And I think that dates back to his days in Brooklyn as a head coach too. I think you would want to have that type of scripted first half so that you can see the different lineups and different variations of things that you want to see. And then I do think when it comes down to it for a closing lineup, it does depend who's playing well. Like, for instance, against the Sacramento Kings, Keon Ellis should have been closing that game out. Against the Denver Nuggets, I'm not sure that he should have, because he played much better, I thought, against Sacramento than he did against Denver. Because you're not going to, other than Donovan or James or Evan at this point, like I think those are the three guys that you look at and say they're going to be closing games out no matter what. After that, like even Jarrett is not guaranteed to close games out. I am curious how that changes now that James Harden is in the fold and how good Jarrett has been lately. Maybe that is something that does change, but history tells us that Jarrett Allen is not guaranteed to close out games. But I think that the other three guys that I've mentioned are. So then it comes down to, okay, of your other options of Jarrett, of Dean Wade, of Sam Merrill, of Jalen Tyson, Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis. Again, if Max Strus comes back, like which of those 2 or 3 guys is having the best night? Which of those 2 or 3 guys is the best matchup? So I don't think that there's a firm answer to this question, because I do think while a starting lineup, I think the Cavs would be best by finding something and sticking with it. I think it should be Dean Wade. We'll see what they do if and when they get fully healthy. But I do think that closing lineups are something that need to be much more feel-based. It can't always be, well, we started this way, we're going to close this way. That's not the right way to coach, and Kenny Atkinson does not do that. Give him credit in that aspect. But I look at this and just say, I think it is much more of a feel type of thing than it is a, well, this group started, so this group has to close. And I do want to quickly mention the pairings, because Project NBA 1 did ask that. So what do you think the pairing should be? I think it should be Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. Again, that group last year, they were plus 11.5 per 100 possessions last year. It hasn't been quite as good this year, and a lot of that has to do with Evan has missed a lot of time and quite frankly has not been as good offensively this year. But I think that the familiarity that he has playing with Donovan would be the way to go. And I just think that James Harden and Jarrett Allen together are going to be dominant. I think that, again, we are going to watch Jarrett Allen play the absolute best basketball of his career. I think every Cavs fan should be incredibly excited by what we have seen from Jarrett Allen. And this did too, to be fair. It started before James Harden got here. It's not like James Harden got here and just instantly turned Jarrett Allen into this awesome player. He had 40 points in that game against the Blazers last weekend, and James Harden was still a member of the Clippers at that point. So I do think that those are some lineups that make a lot of sense for the Cavs. We can dive into that, and I do have a question that I want to answer on Monday's show that kind of dives into some of the more funky lineups that the Cavs can get into. But the NBA has had a lot of news over the past couple of days. One of those things is that expansion could be coming. An expansion draft would not be this summer. But what if it were? Who should the Cavs protect in that draft? We'll talk through it next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The Winter Games, they are here and they are glorious. And if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events that you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. I think hockey in the Winter Games is awesome. I think it's so much different than watching it just like on a random December night, not every 4 years. Like, I just think the intensity level, guys playing for the country, I think it's a really, really cool thing. Some of the other events like snowboarding, really fun to watch. Watch some guys sprint up a hill on skis the other day. I don't know what that event was, but I know, I don't want to take my eyes off this. This is really cool. And you can get in on the action during all of those events. Curling, been a big hit, will always be a big hit. Once every 4 years, that is. It's not going to be a big hit next year, but 4 years from now, you bet curling is going to be a big hit once again. And you can get in on the action with FanDuel. Make sure you're following the Winter Games there, because from medal counts to individual events, finding your angle on the sports that you care about most can be done with FanDuel. They give you more ways to stay connected to the action. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Head to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com today, or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Today's show is also brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone that's willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, well, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move for you. Because instead of hoping that the right person is magically going to be searching. I would like this job. Indeed is going to put your job in front of the right person. They're going to make it so that they stumble across that post, and they help you to match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit the specific criteria that you're looking for. Skills, certifications, locations. Maybe you don't want to pay somebody to relocate for your job. You would prefer to hire somebody that wants to live in your area. Indeed can make that be the case. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Plus, listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Thank you again for making this edition of Locked On Cavs. Thank you for those of you that make Locked On Cavs your first listen every single day. And if you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. It gives you access to an ad-free version of Locked On Cavs wherever you consume your podcast. Plus, you can join a group Discord where there are Cavs fans like yourself chatting about the wine and gold, or you can even hop in to chats centered around other teams. A link is in the show description if you would like to learn more. So you may have seen it, but it does appear as if expansion is coming to the NBA. I think that 2 teams are going to be added, and if I had to bet, those 2 teams are going to be in Las Vegas, Nevada, and in Seattle, Washington. That means a team, maybe Minnesota, maybe Memphis, maybe New Orleans, going to shift to the Eastern Conference, and we will have an expansion draft at some point. Now, to be clear, if this is voted on this summer, it's not like those 2 teams just instantly pop up and boom, 32 teams in the league next year. That's not how it works. This should be a couple of years down the road. So the exercise that we're going to do right now is fun to think about, but it's not necessarily applicable, because I would imagine that if expansion does come to the NBA, which I would expect it to, I think that we are a couple of years away from it. I think that if they vote on it this summer, we're probably looking at 2028, 2029, or 2029, 2030 being the first year of the expansion teams. So an expansion draft wouldn't take place until the offseason before, when those 2 teams start to form the rosters. But this is still a fun exercise, and it comes from Eddie Kilroy on Twitter. Just says, save 8 from the NBA expansion draft. And I don't know exactly what the expansion draft rules would be, should there be one. But going off of what the expansion draft rules were the last time the NBA expanded, teams are allowed to protect 8 players from their roster. And the other aspect of this is, once a player from your roster is picked, another player cannot be selected. So for instance, let's say the Cavs protected our 8 guys, and we will talk about who I think they should be or would be at the moment in just a second. But if one of those guys that is unprotected does not get selected, everybody else that is unprotected, they're off the board. They are no longer eligible to be selected. So you can only lose 1 guy in an expansion draft if you are a team like the Cavs. So a couple of other things that I think are worth noting here, because I did text about this to just get some clarity on the rules. Guys that are impending free agents do not need to be protected. You do not have to protect them in order to, like, let's call this expansion team, I don't know, the Seattle Supersonics. It sounds like a good name for a team, right? They cannot, because Dean Wade, not somebody I'm protecting, because Dean Wade is going to be a free agent this summer. Said Seattle team could not draft Dean Wade only to get his bird rights. He's a free agent. He's not eligible to be drafted. So that makes part of this decision-making a little bit easier. So the Cavs have 15 guys right now on standard contracts. Of those 15, Dean Wade, Keon Ellis, Thomas Bryant, and Larry Nance Jr., all going to be unrestricted free agents this summer. So you know what the Cavs don't have to do for any of those guys? They do not have to protect their contracts. None of those guys are going to be protected. Now, if Keon Ellis were to sign a contract extension, which he is eligible to do, then he would be somebody that would slide into the group of guys that I think the Cavs should and would protect. But as of right now, he is set to be an unrestricted free agent this summer. So therefore, Keon Ellis not getting protected in my mock expansion draft exercise. So the guys that I went with, you've got the 4 obvious ones. Really, I think the 5 obvious ones. You've got Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, James Harden, Jalen Tyson, and Jarrett Allen. Now, I do think that when the expansion draft happens, James Harden probably not going to be on this list. He will at that point be probably 39 years old. I don't think they're going to protect a 39-year-old player, even if he's still playing at just this elite level. Donovan Mitchell, you are obviously protecting one of the best players in the league. Does not matter what kind of money he's on. If he were unprotected in an expansion draft, he is the first pick off the board. You're definitely doing that. Evan Mobley, same thing goes there. Jalen Tyson, on a rookie scale contract, 100% would be selected if left unprotected. He needs to be protected. Jarrett Allen was one that I found to actually be an interesting thought exercise because he's been awesome. And in the merits of this, I think you just sit here and say, yeah, I would like Jarrett Allen to be on the basketball team. I would protect Jarrett Allen. And I do think the Cavs would protect Jarrett Allen. However, I could see a world in which the contract that Jarrett Allen, who is not currently on this deal, the extension that will kick in for him this summer, where he goes from making $20 million to $28 million next year, is not as team-friendly of a deal. Now, maybe while he's playing with James Harden, it looks much more friendlier to the team and to the structure of the salary cap than it does on the surface right now. But that was the only reason why I considered not protecting him. However, ultimately, I did. And then James Harden, you just traded Darius Garland for him. You were protecting him. Sam Merrill was somebody that I also protected. I didn't have to think about this one too hard. I think that he is an elite level shooter, and I think that the contract that he signed this summer, and I do think that there were people that raised some eyebrows when they saw the number that Sam Merrill got, where he signed a 4-year deal worth like $9.5 million per year. I think there were some eyebrows raised at that number. This season, Sam has been worth every penny and more. And I have zero reason to believe that he is not going to continue to be the guy that he has been. I don't want to say that he's only scratching the surface because I don't think that's true, but I think that he still has better days ahead of him. I think you're protecting Sam Merrill here. So then you've got 2 spots left because that is 6 of them down. And basically you have 2 spots for 4 guys. The guys left are Tyrese Proctor, Naquan Tomlin, Dennis Schroeder, and Max Strus. And I think that you have to look at this almost as if because I don't think the Cavs want to lose any of these guys. But I think you need to look at this as, well, who is the least likely to be selected? What has a greater chance? An expansion team, which is not going to be good right away. Expansion teams are young. Expansion teams are inexperienced. They take some time before they figure things out. What are they more likely to select? If you are the GM of an expansion team, are you more likely to take a swing on a 30-year-old Max Strus or a 32-year-old Dennis Schroeder or a rookie Tyrese Proctor or a brand new to basketball still basically at this point guy in Naquan Tomlin? You're betting on upside with these picks. So that's why I protected Tyrese Proctor and Naquan Tomlin. Not because they're better basketball players right now than the other 2 guys, but I just think that the other 2 guys in this situation are far less likely to be selected by an expansion team. And I think that is the way that you have to go about this exercise. I think that is one of the things that you have to think about as you're doing this. It's not, well, would I rather have right now Max Strus on the roster or Tyrese Proctor on the roster? If they're both healthy, the answer is Max Strus. But which player is an expansion team more likely to pick? I think that answer is Tyrese Proctor because 3-4 years from now, when the Seattle Supersonics could be good, Tyrese Proctor is probably, potentially, going to be a better basketball player than Max Strus at that point in time when Max is 34, 35 years old. So I think that that is kind of the way that you have to think about these things. But I do appreciate that question. I think it's a very, very fun exercise. And if expansion does come to the NBA, which I think it will, I'm very, very interested to see, one, where the Cavs are at in that point, and 2, what their list of protections looks like. Now, the Cavs, I think, are a firm lock to be a top 4 seed in the East. I told you yesterday, I think they're going to be the number 2 seed. Well, of the other top 4 teams, who do the Cavs match up with the worst? Who do they match up with the best? We'll talk about it next, right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moments. I do have to say, Wednesday night's game in Cleveland, the first home game for James Harden as a member of the Cavs, that did not feel like a regular season game in February on a Wednesday. It felt like a game in like the middle to late part of April. It felt like a playoff moment in there. It was a really cool atmosphere, and I expect there to be a lot more really cool atmospheres in Cleveland moving on this year. And I think if you're a Cavs fan, don't you want to be part of that atmosphere? Don't you want to be in the building watching James Harden, watching Donovan Mitchell, watching the Cavs as they run towards the top of the East? I think you probably do. And if you want to be in the building, Game Time is the way to go. You can pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and you'll have tickets locked in within minutes. Plus, they show the all-in price up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. You can even see the view from your seat before buying to help make the decision even easier. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off that first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Thank you again for making this edition of Locked On Cavs your first watch on YouTube. And if you're watching right now, please do us a favor. Hit the thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest from Locked On Cavs. And Jimmy Gottermeyer on Blue Sky asks, what Eastern Conference playoff contender do the Cavs match up against the best and also the worst? So I do think that there are 2 answers that are the best, and there's one that I think is the worst. But I want to preface this by saying the Cavs can beat anybody in the East. I don't know that they're going to be the favorites to win the East, but I also am at a point where I've seen, even in this like little small stretch with James Harden, I think their ceiling right now is higher than everyone else in the East. I do. Now, can they reach that? Is 27 games enough time left in the regular season to figure that out? I'm not positive about those things. But I think the ceiling is high. I think it's higher than New York's. I think the ceiling is higher than Boston's, especially if Jason Tatum doesn't come back. I certainly think it's higher than Detroit's. Like, I do think that this Cavs team has a higher ceiling. However, styles can make fights. And I think that is something that's important to think about this postseason. And that's why I think that the Boston Celtics are the worst matchup for the Cavs, partially because they're a team that they're going to try and win the math battle. They're going to try and shoot threes. And what have the Cavs done really poorly all year long? They've not been a good team at defending the three-point arc. I think the Cavs, as constructed, are much more talented than the Boston Celtics are. I don't think that's a question right now. And this is, of course, presuming Jason Tatum does not play. Like, if Tatum comes back and looks like Jason Tatum, then this changes. It's a different conversation. But I am operating right now under the premise that he's not going to play, and if he does play, that he's not going to look like an impacted player, because that is just an unfair ask of a guy that tore his Achilles in May. So I think they're the worst matchup, partially because of the three-point shooting. Now, I don't think that they're a team without weakness, and I would pick the Cavs to win that series should it start today, but I think that they're a worse matchup for the Cavs than the Knicks, than the Detroit Pistons. I think that all 3 of those teams are flawed. And don't get me wrong, the Cavs are flawed too. They're not a perfect basketball team. But I do think that the Celtics could shoot their way into a series win over the Cavs. Kind of the same way they shot their way into a series loss against the New York Knicks last year, which is kind of a dirty little secret that nobody wants to talk about. But I also look at the Knicks, and I think that the Cavs actually match up really well against the Knicks. And I know that there are some folks in this fan base that are emotionally scarred from what happened the last time these two teams saw each other in the playoffs. And I get it. Hey, like the Cavs got their butts kicked in that series, partially because they couldn't figure out ways to get rebounds, and more actually because they couldn't find ways to score the basketball in the series. It wasn't because they weren't defending well enough. I would even venture to say it wasn't even because of the rebounding. It was because they could not put the ball in the basket. I think that's far less of an issue now for them. And I look at the way the Knicks are constructed. And Jalen Brunson is a fantastic player, but Donovan Mitchell is the best player in that series. He's a better basketball player than Jalen Brunson. He's having a better year than Jalen Brunson, and he should be an all-star starter, and I think it's a travesty that he's not. So the Cavs have the best player in that series. And then probably Jalen Brunson, and then I think it would probably be James Harden after him. But the guy I look at is Karl Towns. I think that I don't want to call him an X factor in the series because I think the Cavs are a terrible matchup for him. I think Karl Towns trying to defend a James Harden or Donovan Mitchell led pick and roll is nightmare fuel for the Knicks. Don't think that would go well. And if you go look at Karl's numbers since joining the Knicks against the Cavs, they've not been very good. The Cavs have done a really good job defensively against Towns. And part of that I do think is on the Knicks, maybe not necessarily using him properly. And I just don't think they've ever been able to figure out that fit. But I think that when your point guard is a bad defender, which Jalen Brunson unquestionably is, and your starting center's a bad defender too, that's a tough place to be against a Cavs offense that I think is going to look incredibly lethal the rest of this season. So I actually think the Knicks are a team the Cavs would like to see in the playoffs. And then we get to Detroit, who is 7 games above the Cavs in the standings, but I also think a flawed basketball team. And I think that the Pistons are a tougher matchup for the Cavs than the Knicks would be. And they're a better team than the Knicks are right now. I firmly believe that, and I think a lot of people do. But I also think it's really difficult when you've not found any postseason success to find a way through a conference, to find a way to your finals. The Pistons have won 2 playoff games, I believe it is. They took the Knicks to 6 games last year, and Cade Cunningham is awesome, and they've got a lot of really talented players, and they're a very good basketball team. But they've not been there and done that. They've not been tested after the first round. The Cavs have not gotten to where they should be, but they've got more postseason experience than the Knicks do. That, without a doubt, is true. And the other thing I look at in the postseason, as you know, the game slows down. And offensively, I think the Cavs are much more suited for that. The Pistons right now are a bad half-court basketball team. They don't have a lot of guys other than Cade Cunningham that they can give the basketball to and just say, hey, go get a bucket. And Cade is awesome. He's a great player. But I just don't know that that's going to be enough. And I do think the Cavs actually, especially in this, getting back to the Dean Wade point I made at the start of the episode, I think the Cavs have a couple of guys they could put on Cade Cunningham to make life really difficult for Detroit. And then the one final thing, I think the Cavs have a schematic advantage on the bench. I think Kenny Atkinson is a better X's and O's coach, which often matters a lot in the playoffs, than JB Bickerstaff is. I think JB is a fantastic regular season coach. And it should surprise nobody that he has turned the Pistons around as quickly as he has. But I would not count the chickens before they hatch when it comes to playoff success with that Detroit Pistons team. I think the Cavs would beat them in a series. I think it'd be tough, but I think it is something that I would pick them to do as of right now. Now, like I said, there's going to be another edition of the Locked On Cavs mailbag on Monday. So please, if you have questions, you can either drop them in the YouTube comments, you can tweet them at me at RealDCunningham, or you can email them to me, locavsmailbag@gmail.com. That is locavsmailbag@gmail.com if you've got mailbag questions that you want to get in. So that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Cavs. You can find this show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. If you're watching right now, please do us a favor, hit the thumbs up button for us and click that notification bell. And if you're listening anywhere else, please make sure you subscribe, because I don't want you to miss the next edition of Locked On Cavs. I'll be back on Monday answering more questions right here about the Cleveland Cavaliers on Locked On Cavs.